world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramie, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Wednesday, May 25th, 2022. I'm Kev Laramie and I'll be joined by Duane Rollins in a second. We'll invite you to subscribe to our YouTube page and click on that notification bell to be made aware of whenever we upload a brand new podcast right here covering the beautiful game in North America. And as always, I am joined by Duane Rollins. Duane is in Toronto. I'm in Montreal. Duane, how's it going today?
Pretty good. It's a nice day. I enjoyed the two games last night in the Cup. The Cup always brings out some good stuff. Got an exciting end to the game in Pacific. We had I think a good effort by Halifax against Toronto. They ultimately fell a little short, but I don't think they can hold their head up high after that effort. And it was a good day of Cup games. No, I guess it was a Cup set. York over Pacific's a Cup set. We'll say not a huge one, but it's a one nonetheless. And York's having an interesting little trip. We'll talk more about that in a minute now.
Exactly, because today is the Canadian Championship special. As Duane and I look at the results from yesterday, we'll break down statistically both of those results. We'll look at the penalty shootout, what happened there. We'll also break down the bracket, what's going to happen tonight. We'll preview Montreal's matchup at home tonight against Forge FC. Will we see a battle of the brothers on the pitch? David, but this time not against Goliath, but against Mathieu maybe tonight. We'll break that down later on the show. And can Vancouver get a victory in the Canadian Championship for the first time in a few years? We'll see if that is the case tonight. Or can Cavalry repeat their exploits of 2 years ago? We'll break that down later. But Duane, let's start the show by looking at overall the matchups in the quarterfinals of the Canadian Championships. This is what happened last night. Toronto won on the road in Halifax 2-1. It wasn't as easy as expected, but Toronto got the job done and they will be moving on to the semifinals. Pacific FC York United, upset alert. York United winning from the penalty spot on the road at Starlight Stadium. Starbright for York United. Two teams of the Grand Toronto Area, the Greater Toronto Area, or better known as the GTA, will be represented in the semifinal of the Canadian Championship. Maybe three, depending on Forge FC's results tonight. But Duane, what did you think of Toronto's performance in Halifax last night?
Yeah, I'll just, for my Hamilton friends listening out there, I will say Golden Horseshoe just so that they don't hit me later. But nonetheless, it's not part of Toronto. Hamilton's its own thing. It's very close to Toronto. Anyway, what did I think about TFC last night? Look, they started a very rotated lineup, a very young lineup, 7 young Canadians in the first half. Didn't really generate much offense. And this is kind of a problem. If they defend, they can't create offensively. Now, Halifax sat back really well, defended, got stuck in, to use the old adage, and they really showed well in the game. The second half, they make the subs. They put Jonathan Osorio on. They put Jimenez on. Osorio really showed his class in that game. He immediately made an impact. I think outside of about a 15-minute stretch in that second half where Halifax, when they got the goal, which was maybe a keeping error by Hugh. You could say that for sure. He didn't react that quickly to the shot. It went through some legs. But nonetheless, it was a nicely placed shot from outside the box. Halifax gets back into it. They get a little momentum. For a while there, it looks a little touch and go. But Toronto ultimately fought back and got the win. And I think that this is one of those games that kind of no one loses because, well, Halifax literally loses. But in terms of the narrative, Halifax can really hold their head up high. They played a great game in front of a great crowd. It was a great crowd. The crowd's been complimented a lot. I'm not trying to discount that. It was an amazing crowd, an amazing atmosphere. They get a great result in front of them in terms of the effort. They can, have the moral victory. Toronto gets the literal victory, which I think that team needed because they hadn't won in 6 games. So even if it is against Halifax, they can take that and build upon that. The kids played a big role in that, so they didn't really tire out too many of the older players, and everyone goes away happy. But Halifax, if you're a KMPL fan, you might argue that Halifax deserved the win. I would suggest that maybe deserve is a strong way to put it. I'd say that they could have got the win is a better way to put it if you looked at that game carefully. They had a lot of shots towards target. A lot of them almost run up for corners, though. So, yeah.
No, exactly. And we'll look at the stats in a second. We saw the starting 11 for both team, and you mentioned a young team, but a young team with what I would call experience playing for Toronto this season. We saw the lineup for Toronto. Nelson, Perusa, of course, were there. Perusa scored for Toronto. Let's look at the box score. Let's look at the stats from last night. Toronto and Halifax at Wanderers Ground, my favorite place to watch soccer in this country, Duane. I love the environment. In a great evening on the East Coast, the true East Coast of this country, Halifax. What a beautiful place to watch soccer. I love my time in the kitchen. I'm looking forward to the next time I can join my privateers in the kitchen. 14 shots, only one on target, and that was a downfall of Halifax. Samuel Salter scored at the 69th minute that tied the game. Jordan Perusa scored the first goal for TFC at the 55th minute. Peter Schall scored, but unfortunately it wasn't his own goal, and Toronto gets the victory. 7 shots, 2 on target. Toronto has 56% of the possession. The brunt of the statistics goes to Toronto in this one, and Toronto now will be moving on and be playing in the semifinals of the Canadian Championship. When we look at the importance of this tournament for Toronto, Duane, it's clear that MLS will be difficult for TFC this season. This is becoming TFC's target to reclaim their crown in the Canadian Championship and lift the Voyageurs Cup come finals time.
Well, yeah, I think that, the rotated lineup off the start reflects the fact that they do have to play 3 games in short succession, 2 in the league, and they don't want to fall too far behind there. I mean, you may be quicker to give up the season than TFC itself is. Fair enough, right? They're not going to quite mail it in just yet. They still are within touching distance. The story of the winning goal, we should mention, Jacob Schaffelberg was involved in the play. The hometown boy came on late. He's had a bit of a nagging injury, came on, gets a little ball down the wing, puts the ball in. It's a tough own goal. It's a real tough own goal because it kind of bounced off about 3 different things, and it wasn't one of those I headed it into the top corner type things. It just unfortunately hit Schalke last, but Osorio kind of created it by running into the right space. And as I said, he was the real difference. And we've made this comparison before. Jonathan Osorio makes more than the entire roster of Halifax combined,
multiple times more, and that is very true. But you're talking about. Sorry, go ahead.
It stands to reason that the TFC should have won that game, and they did get the result. And look, before I let you jump in, what do I think about it? Yeah, look, realistically, this is their target that they might be able to get. If they do, in fact, draw Montreal in the next round, and Montreal has some work to do, as they might well remember from last year against their game against Forge. It's not going to be an easy out. But if they do get that job done, they'll be the favorite, but you never know what Montreal's going to do heading into that game, right? In terms of lineups.
It depends when that game is actually played. There's a couple possibilities, but there's also a couple days that can change. And if Montreal is having enough time to recover, that part of June will be busy for Montreal. They're actually having a break, an extended break with the international break until June 18 after May 28, which is their last game until mid-June. And then at this area of early 20th to 22nd of June when the next window of game for the semifinal will take place. But you're right, Toronto FC moving on to the semifinal and will play the winner of CF Montreal and Forge that will take place later tonight. Another game that took place last night, Duane, it was Pacific FC versus York United. Pacific FC making a big, I guess, gamble and not winning in penalties. York United, even though they had to travel literally almost the entire country, was able to get the job done from the penalty spot. What was your overall thought on this performance by York United? I know over the last few years you've seen York United play more than other teams in the CanPL. What is your thought on York United's exploit on eliminating maybe the best Canadian Premier League team this season?
Yeah, look, this was a good result for York, and they were winning this game outright until the 96th minute when Pacific pulls one out of the blue, completely not really expected at all to take it to penalties. Once that happens, you expect Pacific to take that momentum, York to put their head down and fall apart basically in penalty shootout. They don't do that. They have a pretty effective shootout, go 4 for 5 and end up winning that thing with 2 saves. A great result, a great, sort of gut check for them. And York, to me, is sneaky sneaky good this year. I think that they clearly the third or fourth best team in this league, and for them to get that result was a big result for them. And in terms of their run so far, if you look at what they have to do, if they were to somehow pull an upset in the next round, they'll be on the road again. This is pre-drawn. They'll be on the road for a third straight game. They'll be probably playing Vancouver, you would think, unless Calgary pulls that upset off again. And it would be a remarkable run for them. We haven't really had a true Cinderella run in a cup competition in this country ever, really. I mean, I guess maybe Montreal winning in 08, you could say that, but it was a different format then, so it's not really a cup run. It was more of a Toronto was not very good run. Anyway, it would be great. And look, the other thing I used to take away from this is another great goal by D-Rose Kid, which I should stop calling him D-Rose Kid. He's his own man. And absolutely, that is something to watch out for. And I think there's going to be a lot of interested Canadian viewers looking at that young man in the days ahead to see where he ends up because of his dad, let's face it.
Because of his heritage, of course. Let's talk about Osase de Rosario, who scored at the 31st minute. 6 minutes of doom for York United. Roger Thompson scored before that at the 25th minute to draw the game 0-0, well, 1-1 at that point to draw this game. Amer Didic had 2 goals in this one, scored the first one at the 11th minute, and at the death of the game scored the equalizer for Pacific FC that put this team in extra time. But, well, actually in penalties. And in the penalties, because after extra time it was 0-0, and they needed penalties. And let's look at the penalty shootouts. Let's look at what happened in the penalty shootouts, and we'll come back to the stats, because York United were first to kick. And Duane, statistically speaking, in penalty shootout, we've talked about this before. I don't have it in front of me, but I did the research last Euro. When you are the second team to kick, usually you have a better advantage. But York were able to get the win. Being the first team to kick, it doesn't always happen. But former PLSQ player Diadizin Abzi, and I butchered his name, I apologize, scored the first one, and then save by York. Nico Giantopoulos, who also was on the bench for Vancouver over the weekend, right? Dominic Zator scored. Mateo Hernandez scored also. Eduardo Jesus missed, but Jordan Wilson scored the winner. 3-1 for Thomas Meyer-Giguère scored. If you are followers of CF Montreal, he was a player of their academy, now a standout for Pacific. He scored in the penalty shootout. Gianni Dos Santos scored, and Gennaro Daniels made it tied 3-3. And then, of course, Jordan Wilson scored the winner. Marco Bustos missed the game tie at that point. That would have been to force an extra penalty shootout. And York United moves on to the semifinal of the Canadian Championship. York United representing the Canadian Premier League very well this season.
Yeah, I believe they call him Big G, so you don't have to butcher that last name if you want moving forward in terms of York's keeper. It's a bit of a long one there. Look, yeah, it was a well-taken shootout. That's what I will say. It's very technical, very efficient, and I don't think there were a lot of misses in there. There were a couple saves and a lot of well-taken penalties, and that's nice to see. This competition, oddly, it offers another opportunity for high-pressure penalties to be taken by Canadian players, which doesn't happen a whole lot. And, it's an opportunity to practice that, which maybe they'll need more in the days ahead if they play more and more competitive games in tournaments that matter. So that's another thing to look at. No, it was a fun day of cup competition. And I think that York is a nice little story emerging from this. It looks like if things go to chalk tonight, that they will be the last standing CanPL team in this competition. So they will fly the flag for the league. It's up to CanPL fans whether they want to hashtag CanPL4. I don't know whether you want to or not, but
can't be for Canada, I guess. I don't know. That'll be interesting, but we'll see what happens tonight, because tonight there'll be 2 games taking place, Duane, and you and I will preview those 2 games after this short break right here on Soccer Today.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Kev Larman with Duane Rollins. We'll invite you to subscribe to our YouTube page and hit that notification bell to be made aware of whenever we upload a brand new podcast. If you're watching us via Twitter Live, a lot of you are watching us right now. Thank you for joining us and tuning in on this Canadian Championship special as Duane and I talk about the biggest soccer tournament in Canada. A tournament that is, of course, the Voyageurs Cup and the trophy that will be lifted at the end of this tournament. We've talked about the games that happened last night. Let's reminisce and go back to the bracket for a second, Duane, as we can look at some of the things that will be needed to watch tonight. We know that Montreal is playing Forge. Forge has played really well a few months ago and has represented the Canadian Premier League in the Champions League. The CONCACAF Champions League, because of their play in the CONCACAF League. They played a lot of good games early on. They made it peak a bit too early. They struggled in the league until they recovered a few weeks ago. Was it in time to be peaking to face maybe their best opposition in a long time? Because tonight, David Choinière, who scored a few goals last time they played in Halifax in the league, can they repeat this against Montreal? Will Montreal rotate a lot of their lineup? Those are questions that will have answers later tonight.
Yeah, Montreal's lineup will tell us a lot. I don't think Montreal will take Forge lightly, considering Forge took them all the way to penalties, and not only two penalties, very deep into penalties, if you remember that penalty shootout last year.
Breza won it at the 11th kick, so there you go.
Yeah, you can't get much closer to getting the upset without getting the upset if you Forge's perspective. Now, that game was in Hamilton, so that is a factor in this. Saputo will offer a different situation, although I don't know what kind of midweek crowd you're going to get for that game tonight, for a Canadian Championship game. That is always a tougher draw in the MLS markets, and I'm sure CanPL fans will have something to say about that on social media tonight. You guys have at it.
But it's a beautiful day outside today, so if you are wondering if you should go, maybe you should, because it will be an amazing evening at Stade Saputo, which is a beautiful place to watch soccer, I have to admit.
It does have good sightlines, I will give you that. It's a very nice little stadium that needs to have an upgrade around its bathrooms and concourse areas, is what I'll say.
But I can't complain because I got to be one of the best seats in the house, right? So, usually I'm in, the actual broadcast booth. That's my seat, so I'm really privileged to enjoy this beautiful venue.
Yes, they always put us up in 113. It's not that bad of a section up there. You can go great. There's no bad view.
Well, there's no bad views. You're right, and it's a beautiful place. So if you are wondering if you should go, if you shouldn't go, you go tonight, and that should be fun.
We should talk about Forge a little bit more, though, because we're talking about the seating arrangements to Saputo, which is probably irritating the Forge fans. Look, they got a good result on the weekend. They beat Halifax 4-0, which we saw yesterday. Them take TFC to the brink. So the idea Forge can't get a result in this is silly. I tweeted this last night. If you still think that CanPL teams can't have a one-off game against an MLS team and win, then you're not paying attention. That's not how this works. Now, over 34 games, probably they're going to pull apart. The talent's going to show. But over one game, especially when the motivation level might be slightly higher on one team or rotation is happening, it absolutely could be an upset. But Montreal, they do like this competition. They particularly like the competition that they qualify into from this. And that is the biggest difference between, I think, the CanPL teams and the MLS teams in this, is the CanPL teams view this as a championship onto its own, which it is, obviously. I very much think that too, whereas the MLS teams look at it as a entryway to the CCL.
Yeah, it's the entryway to the CCL, as you say, for the Canadian teams. Until Leagues Cup, where there'll be multiple ways to qualify. But let's talk only about the Leagues Cup in 2023 when we actually have to.
Yeah, this is the last version of the CCL as we currently know it that you're qualifying into it. The format will change in 2 seasons from now. We'll probably be here talking about it because this show never ends. Nonetheless,
somebody's gonna have to talk about it, and might as well be us. We've talked about the Forge aspect and how they had a big victory against the Wanderers last weekend. Well, Montreal is on a bit of a slump for the first time in a while, having lost their last 2 games in MLS. They've lost against Real Salt Lake last Wednesday, May 22nd. That was Sunday, actually, May 22nd, and they lost against Nashville on Wednesday. 1 on the road, 1 at home. It was a 2-1 loss at Stade Saputo against Justin Glad and Real Salt Lake. Jordan Mihailovic did score earlier on in the game at the 43rd second, to be precise, and that was the third fastest goal in Montreal's history, but that wasn't enough as Real Salt Lake was able to perform a great comeback, and it could have been a lot worse for Montreal. They could have maybe conceded 3 more goals with 2 point-blank saves by Sebastian Breza and 1 missed open shot by a Real Salt Lake player. It could have been 5-1 really easily. So when I look at this game upcoming against Forge, Duane, it's mea culpa time. It's time to readdress what Montreal can do. Montreal needs to do rotation. They've played their favorite lineup. Wilfried Nancy played his favorite 11 maybe too much. Maybe because of the undefeated streak they had in Major League Soccer. Maybe that influenced his rotation of his squad. There needs to be some rotation. Some players haven't played a lot of the last few weeks. From Zoran Basson to, of course, Zachary Broguillard. Ahmed Hamdi hasn't played enough. He hasn't shown a lot. But I want to see Samuel Piet play a lot. You need 5 Canadians to start. So that's important looking at Montreal's lineup and Vancouver's lineup. We'll talk about Vancouver in a minute. But when we talk about Montreal, of course, there's the 2 defeats, but Montreal is still doing well in the league, and they have to prepare for Saturday, knowing that then they won't play until the 18th. They're playing on Saturday against Cincinnati, and that's not an easy game. So, Duane, I'm going to put you in Wilfried Nancy's shoes. If you are him, how much of a rotation and how much of a priority do you put on tonight, knowing that Saturday you need 3 points, and if you get the 3 points, it's almost a 6 points game because Cincinnati is battling with you close in the standings too.
I think that you look at this similar to what Toronto did in the sense that, Toronto's all their kids are young that start anyway, so it kind of is hard to compare it direct. But if you look at the Canadian players, I think you put them out. Your regular Canadian starters, you roll them out unless they're completely run into the ground. So your Millers and your Johnsons, you mentioned Piat, he needs minutes, so let's get him out there. We can have a conversation through the summer to make sure Piet's getting enough minutes to talk in the fall, but that's another topic we have a lot of time for. And hopefully he does because he's been such a big part of the program. But nonetheless,
he has to be going, even if it's just for like being a leader in the locker room and not play. That's fine. Like there's 1 or 2 spots like that where he should go. But anyways, we'll talk about that later on.
No, I think you start your Canadian starters, and if you have Piat and Johnson and Miller, that's going to be a core right down the middle that's going to really solidify you anyway. And then from there, maybe you start to run out some other kids, which by their very nature are going to be Canadian if they're coming from your development system anyway. I do think it's important for the MLS teams to rotate a bit. I was having this argument on Twitter last night with someone that was arguing that it was disrespectful to competition to rotate by the MLS teams. I disagree. That's how every cup competition in the world works. You need to work your young kids through. You need to give your young players a chance to perform, and a cup competition does that. You should believe that your talent level is higher enough than a lower level anyway, and with all due respect, CanPL is a lower level, so you got to roll those out. Now, that said, like TFC last night, you put a couple of weapons on the bench in case you got to pull them up. Break glass in case of emergency type stuff, which is what TFC had to do last night.
You're like, okay, you can come in now. And that's true. If you're Montreal, you probably do the same thing where you're going to rotate. You'll see what is the energy levels of your player, and players that haven't played in a while that could be close to making a return. And that's not saying I have prior information. I don't. But is Mason Toye available from the bench maybe tonight? Ooh, long time coming, and maybe you introduce him 15 minutes late in the game and you see what you can do. Those are the type of situation where sometimes it's treated as a laboratory, as an experiment, and we'll see what Montreal does at home against Forge FC. But you're right, though. They will not take Forge lightly because in the past, Forge have shown that they can play with Major League Soccer's teams, and we'll see Montreal take this game very seriously at home to propel them to the semifinals and probably a road game against Toronto. We'll see how that unfolds in a potential semifinal matchup between Montreal and Toronto. The other matchup in this evening in the quarterfinals, Duane, is, of course, Vancouver versus Cavalry. Can Cavalry repeat their exploits of 2020, eliminating Vancouver? Cavalry was the first team in the history of the Canadian Premier League to eliminate a Major League Soccer team in the Voyageurs Cup tournament, and Cavalry will have the opportunity to repeat that tonight. They are doing a whole lot better than they were in the standings. Duane, we have seen them climb in the CanPL. They've struggled over the last few weeks of the season, but lately they've found ways to climb, and now they're back all the way to second spot behind only Pacific. Can they parlay that run of form with a win against Vancouver? At home though, it's in Calgary. It's at Spruce Meadows. It's at Atco Field tonight. Can Cavalry repeat 2020?
They could. They're playing Vancouver. We all, if you listen to us, know what we think of the talent level of Vancouver. I'm not convinced Vancouver has depth to rotate, so we'll see. Probably they'll try, and they should to a certain extent, because they do have to figure their league form out. But this is a team in Vancouver that can't score with their starters out there, so they're going to have to figure it out in a tough place to play, because it's a weird field there. It's a weird pitch. Weird dimensions, kind of a strange little place to go into. It's not the best playing surface. They're going to have to figure that out. Now, the positive, the half full way to look at this as a Whitecaps fan is it could offer an opportunity to get you some confidence if you could have a solid win. And what I will say is this, is as much as we are dismissive of Vancouver's talent, there still has more talent than a CanPL team, and that is meant not disrespectful to CanPL at all. It stands to reason when you pay them 3 times as much, 5 times as much, maybe 10 times as much in some cases, right? That's just going to be what happens here. So, look, I'm not going to go so far as to say that Vancouver, is going to lose this or will lose this or is the favorite to lose this. I'm going to say, however, that they have a lot to prove in this competition. They always do. They did get a win earlier. They made lots of jokes about it against Valor. Mission achievement unlocked. They put the little 80s graphic up there.
Yeah.
Good for them for having a laugh at themselves, because, if you lose twice in a row, then you got to figure that out. But yeah, look, they have another chance here. And look, the tournament, the draw has set up for them to go to a final. And if you go to a final, then hell, you might as well win it at that point. And then suddenly the joke's on the rest of us. The Vancouver Whitecaps are Canadian champions and
exactly.
Wooden Spoon. They could do the DC United thing where they're the Wooden Spoon winners and won the Open Cup. So there you go.
And we'll see if maybe they can. I don't want to say save Vanny Sartine's job, because I don't think his job is in jeopardy, but that would become a point of contention if things continue the same way in the league. We saw the standings a few minutes ago on the league for MLS, and Vancouver is. Well, they're the Wooden Spoon in MLS right now. So that's the case. All right, the show's almost over, Duane. It's time to do predictions. We don't always do predictions, but let's do predictions for the Canadian Championship for tonight. Montreal at home against Forge FC. 1 game, winner takes all. What is your prediction tonight?
1-1. Montreal wins on penalties. Heartbreak again for Hamilton.
I go with a 2-0 win. A big performance tonight by Mathieu Choignard, with a performance maybe from the midfield that would inspire his MLS playing time too. We'll see what happens, but I say 2-0 Montreal tonight at Stade Saputo. Later tonight at 9 p.m., Cavalry at home versus Vancouver. What is your prediction for the game that will take place at Atco Field at Spruce Meadows?
Well, every ounce of me wants to be that guy and predict the Cavalry win, but I'm going to be boring and say the Whitecaps just win a normal 2-0 win here.
That's okay, Duane, because I'm going to go there.
Right,
Cavalry FC will trot all over Vancouver. Vancouver Whitecaps, you need to get the priorities straight. And I guess not being the last in the league will be the case, because Cavalry, Tommy, and company will trot all the way and will be the first past the post. I don't know any other horse reference racing I can do, but Yeehaw Cavalry, you can go all the way, and Spruce Meadows will be home to another upset in the Canadian Championship.
There you go. I actually, if we want to continue the predictions, I think Toronto's going to win the Voyageurs Cup. Not from a homer perspective. I think that of the 3 teams remaining there, because they have that home game against Montreal. Montreal doesn't play at BMO well, even when Toronto's bad. I could see a pathway for TFC to win this, and everyone in the rest of the country being very upset that a bad TFC team won it, but it wouldn't be the first time. 2013, anyone?
Well, yeah, exactly. Most of the time TFC won it is when they were bad. So that is the case. But we'll talk about it tomorrow on a brand new edition of Soccer Today. And until then, you can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute, myself at Kev Laramie, and this show at Soccer Today SPN. You can subscribe to this podcast everywhere you find your favorite podcast, which means Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, and Google Podcasts. If you want to find more, you can visit our website, sportspodcastingnetwork.com, for more. We would love to have you come on the website. There's going to be more writing very soon on the website. There's a few things I'm working on for the website, so we'll invite you to visit the website a bit more often, which is sportspodcastingnetwork.com. Of course, if you'd like to advertise on this show, we have advertising opportunities. You can reach me at sportspodcastnetwork@gmail.com. And if you would like to support us financially and be made aware of our special show that will be making a comeback in the next few weeks, which is the Two Solitude Soccer Podcast, talking about the Canadian national team heading into Qatar, please go to patreon.com/sportspodcastingnetwork. But as always, for Duane Rollins, I'm Kev Laramie, and until next time, we wish you a great soccer.